This is episode number 37, featuring artist Stefan Baumann from the PBS show The Grand View. Welcome to the PleinAir Podcast from PleinAir Magazine. I'm your host, Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we dive into the world of painting outdoors, often called plein air painting. For those of you who don't know, plein air is a French term essentially meaning outdoors or outside. The French say plein air, others say plein air, but it doesn't matter how you say it. It's a huge movement of people who go around and paint outdoors, and this show is all about that movement, which we call the new golf. This week's podcast is brought to you by the PleinAir Convention, which is coming up very, very soon, getting exciting. It's the largest gathering of plein air artists in history, and it's coming this April in San Diego. You want to learn more? Go to PleinAirConvention.com. This year we're doing something very cool called Plein Air Wars, which we'll tell you about soon. It's my desire to see more people fall in love with plein air painting, and you can help by sharing this podcast with your friends. Put it out on social media or email, and I hope you'll subscribe too on iTunes. If you have feedback or interview, just reach me, Eric, at PleinAirMagazine.com. The interview is brought to you by the Plenair Salon art competition. Imagine your painting on the cover of a national magazine at Barnes & Noble stores to be seen by millions of people walking through the store. That could happen to you. A chance to win cash prizes, national exposure, and build your brand as an artist. It really is a career launcher, and we've had a lot of people who have won who are completely unknown. So you can learn more at PlenairSalon.com. Remember, the big final annual prize is just around the corner, so you want to get your entry in today. Well, this is really a good interview with artist Stefan Baumann, who does the show The Grand View, which has been on PBS for many, many years, and I thought it'd be interesting to get his perspective on things. Stefan, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm just in the middle of a snowstorm here up in Mount Shasta, so kind of snowed in today and getting ready to paint.
So for those who don't know, where is Mount Shasta?
Mount Shasta is in Northern California. It's about 250 miles north of San Francisco on the California-Oregon border.
Ah. So you live in a ranch up there, don't you?
Yeah. I used to live in San Francisco for about 20 years, and I was originally born and raised in Lake Tahoe. So I constantly wanted to get back into the woods. And so I had an opportunity when the real estate market dropped. I sold my house in San Francisco and came up here and bought 10 acres, and we call it the Grand View Ranch after the television show. But here at the ranch, the views are really stunning. So it's an appropriate title for the place we live in.
So are you going to go painting in the snow today?
I'm going to be doing studio work. A lot of my paintings that I do online are done in studio, so I'm going to do some catch-up work.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. It's like, snow, you want me to go out there and freeze?
Well, there are times when I really, really love painting in the snow. I have done a series of Yosemite plein air paintings on Christmas, and I found that going to the national parks at Christmas time is amazing, because very few people actually travel between Christmas and New Year's in the national parks. They're usually so busy visiting family and relatives. And Christmas Day, I made it a pilgrimage that every year I would go up there and paint a painting, just celebrating that day, being in the park. You could practically park your car in the middle of the road, but oftentimes you are painting in the snow. So, but I think that's part of the magical part of it, especially
Absolutely.
When you're doing a series.
Well, I love painting in Yosemite, although I will tell you that last time I painted there, which has probably about 7 or 8 years ago now, I was so disgusted with the amount of traffic and the buses and the noise just from all the traffic. It really was a turnoff. But you turn the other direction and you see the most spectacular scenery in the world. So, it's worth doing one way or the other. So before we get into all of this, there's a lot to talk about today. For the sake of our listeners, you do a national television show on PBS stations called The Grand View. And I'm curious about how that all began. How did this show actually happen?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when I go to the PleinAir conventions, I'm approached a lot by the artists there, and they go, "Oh my God, how did you get so lucky to land a gig like that, going to the national parks and painting for PBS?" And I kind of look at them and go, "I didn't quite just land into it; I created it." Back, you and I go back quite a way.
Yeah, we do.
If you look at what's happened with painting over the years, I mean, as of 1980, 85, there weren't very many people painting outdoors. As you probably remember when you started doing plein air painting, it was relatively an obscure passion of people, and a lot of the artists back then actually were just painting outdoors to do better studio paintings. So I started teaching in the Bay Area while I was going to Stanford, and being born and raised and painting in Lake Tahoe, I always had a fondness for painting outdoors. And we used to just call it painting outdoors. And I had a teacher that would take us out in Lake Tahoe and paint.
Who was that teacher?
I don't remember. She was actually one of the many teachers that I was taking at the time. But I don't recall her specific name, but she believed in painting outdoors, and I was probably about 12 or 13 at the time.
Oh, you were young.
Yeah. No, I'm probably one of the preliminary plein air painters. I mean, I'm 12 or 13, so we're looking at middle like 1975.
Wow.
And I really wasn't very good at it. I mean, it really wasn't. In fact, I remember my mom looking at one of my paintings and calling it the Bad Dream in Green. And she said, "You will never, ever, ever take another painting class again the rest of your life." She was German and she was very determined. But so when I moved down to Stanford and was taking classes there, I started up an art class. And I still had this fondness of painting outdoors, and I really wanted to master it. So, and I didn't quite have enough money to go travel to these different parks. So I kind of would make deals with my students where they would pay for my way, and I'd give them a free week's worth of education in the different parks. And so we went to Yosemite, and everybody there was just having such a good time. And mind you, there were no other plein air painters at the time. I mean, it was relatively an obscure activity that we did. And while we were out there, they said, "Oh my God, we're having such a good time. You must be able to market this somehow." And I'm about 22 and 23, just young enough to be stupid enough to think, yeah, I could do this. And so I thought about it, and I thought, that guy on TV, on PBS with the big hair?
Bob Ross.
Bob Ross, yeah. I thought, he seems like a happy guy. I said, if I brought this thing to PBS, and instead of doing the studio shots, what about if I actually did this outdoors? Now, this was in the early 80s, so going outdoors with a camera crew and everything was very expensive and quite cumbersome. And that's where my age was good, because I was not educated enough, but I had the dream. And I think when you're younger, you're more apt to take chances like that. So I contacted all the PBS stations, and there's about 380 PBS stations. They all work independently of each other, which I didn't know. And I tried to pitch them this idea, and I did a preliminary tape. And back then, you needed huge cameras. And so while we were out there taping, we would cause quite a issue with park rangers and stuff, and getting the permits and all the things that you had to do to get a crew out there. And I floated this tape to all the different PBS stations. And for a year, all I heard was no, 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 not interested, not interested. Nobody cares about a painting show. Painting outdoors, no, we have Bob Ross. We don't need anybody else. And so I got very, very frustrated with it. And finally I said, if I could just get one more call. And I think what's really interesting about this is because this is kind of important for artists in general, because artists deal a lot with ego, and they don't really like being told no, especially when they're doing something that is really close to their heart. So a lot of artists don't step out of themselves and make the calls to get to the galleries and make things happen for themselves. But I was so determined that I wanted this to happen that I was teaching in Foster City at the time. And I remember there was a payphone. I mean, that's how old this was back then. They actually had payphones back then.
That wasn't that long ago, believe it or not.
I know, but there's a lot of people that are listening and that probably don't even know what a payphone is. But, so I remember going to my class where I was teaching, and there was a payphone outside, and every week I called KCSM, which is the station in San Mateo, and it was my last resort. And every week I would call her, and I'd say, did you see my tape? And she'd go, no. And I said, can I call you again next week? And she said, sure. And I did that for an entire year, every week. And it taught me one thing, that just because, you know, you get turned down for something, that you shouldn't stop your dream. And I find that with artists and teaching artists, they'll approach one gallery or they'll approach one idea. And if it doesn't quite click for them, they immediately think it's something wrong with their art, or they get damaged, you know, with it. You just have to kind of pursue your passion and get that every time somebody tells you a no. That's one less person you have to ask.
Well, you know, that's one of the most important principles of marketing, isn't it? It's that you just keep going. It's repetition, and we have to look at situations like that. And I think, as you probably ended up doing, is you have to look at that and say, every time I get a no, I'm getting closer to a yes. And if you look at it from that standpoint, rather than feeling rejected, it makes a huge difference. So what happened after that?
Well, you know, after a year of that, and it was kind of got to be a joke, but I was very persistent with it. All of a sudden on a Friday, I got a phone call from her, and I could hear our demo tape in the background. And she said, oh my God, this is the most incredible idea. She says, get into my office Monday morning. We need to talk about it. And so we started talking about it. And, you know, here again, youth is wonderful because you just kind of take things on without really having life experiences to it. I sat in her office and she says, well, we need about, you know, we're going to go with this. And we need about $400,000, $500,000. So if you can get that together, we can do that. And so I thought, well, you know, if Rob Ross could be on TV, or anyone else is on TV, that must be an easy task to do. So I became kind of like a producer at that point, trying to find money for our project. And I found out that the art world and people who produce products for the art world, and even Michaels, they don't have a lot of extra money. It's not like working for Kiko Man or some of the Cuisinart. You know, if it was a cooking show, it'd be a lot easier. And so I ended up having to actually almost self-fund it all myself, primarily because it's one of those things where you can't, it's putting the horse in front of the cart. People would say, well, I need to know what the series looks like in order for us to invest in it. And you would go, well, I need your money so that I can make the series so I can invest in it. And so, you know, to start out something is really, really hard. But we had one thing in favor, is that the technology changed. And for the first year when we were trying to get going, we had all beta cams. And it was very cumbersome. And with the new Canons and the different cameras that came out at that period of time, I had a wonderful cameraman by the name of Robert Martin that kind of partnered up with me, and we went out, just the two of us, and we went to the parks and started shooting this. And it was just tenacity and persistence. And, you know, if I talk to artists today who constantly ask me about doing projects, and I tell them you just have to have tenacity, persistence, and to do something you really, really feel you believe in.
So how long has the show been on the air now? How many years? How many seasons?
Well, you know, we shot 20 episodes, and I think that 20 episodes was fairly reasonable for doing a park sequence. We've been on since probably about 15 years.
Wow.
And we're pretty much on the Create station, which is an arm of American Public Broadcasting, and on PBS nationally. And we just upped our contract again. The great thing about doing something like this for PBS is that it has a long shelf life.
Right.
And so, you know, like Bob Ross has been dead for 20 years, but a lot of people don't know that.
Well, unless they look at the fashion.
Yeah.
But you kind of created your own fashion. You created your own look and your own brand. You told me, I think I told you, I thought you were just dressing that way for the show, and you told me, no, this is the way you dress all the time. You have developed your own thing, and you make your own clothes, don't you?
I have them made.
You have them
in
made.
Oregon. Yeah. I get a lot of comments of people that watch, especially since I'm on YouTube now. I get a lot of feedback from there, and it's surprising that YouTube is actually a bigger market for us now than PBS.
Yeah, tell me about that. You have a YouTube channel, and is it called The Grand View?
It's called The Grand View. Actually, it's Stefan Baumann, The Grand View. I kind of do everything under the Grand View label. I mean, like we have the Grand View Ranch, Grand View Television Show, the Grand View. I even like autograph my words, have a grand day. You know, so, you know, I think in marketing, you have to be kind of persistent with things. I know that growing up, I've always had a fondness. I was kind of an old soul. And so I always had a fondness of just nice attire, something a little bit more fancy and a little bit more, you know, special. I kind of think that artists themselves are constant artists. And a lot of times you kind of have to think out of the box a little with yourself. You know, if you want to become an artist and get new ideas and new visions, even changing the color of your shirt can change your whole attitude towards everything. I noticed that when we're at the conventions, you wear red socks.
Oh, you noticed?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I wear red socks, as I say in the marketing boot camp. I wear red socks because it's a reminder that I'm not a natural marketer and that I have to force myself to market. So as you probably remember, a whole bunch of people went out and bought red socks that day when I said that on the stage. But I still do it. I don't wear them every day, but the concept is that it kind of stimulates my thinking. It's like, okay, I got to make sure that I'm doing certain amounts of things that I don't naturally do today.
Yeah. And that's kind of like with how I am. I've gotten to the point where, you know, I dress the way that I do because that's the way I enjoy dressing. But it came off of my television show originally because when I first was doing my TV show, I thought I had an interesting run-in with Thomas Kincaid at a major art show. And, you know, there were probably 1,000 people at the show, and his limo pulls up. And he steps out, and everybody there was dressed in superb attire because it was a gallery event. And, you know, when he kind of came out, I kind of thought he was kind of a little ordinary. And I thought, you know, wow, it's like you just kind of always expect, like if you saw Madonna come out of a limo, I mean, you really wouldn't want to see her dressed up in a running suit. I mean, you kind of expect her to kind of come out as a star. And so I thought when I was designing the television show, I actually thought about what I was going to wear. And so I just couldn't see myself just in a T-shirt and a pair of shorts and walking through the parks. What we were doing is kind of an old school kind of John Muir a tradition of traveling in the parks and painting them.
Right.
And so, I adopted kind of that look. And then I found out when I would go into public dressed like that, I'd have people who watched the show that would run me down and they'd go, I know that's you because nobody dresses like that.
Yeah.
And so it kind of became kind of a signature thing. And even since I've gotten older, I mean, our shows were done quite a long time ago. And even at the convention, I have people tap me on the shoulder and they go, I knew it was you, even though now I don't look the same because I've got shorter hair and I don't quite dress like that anymore, but I do dress in that attire. And people will actually recognize me for that. And even when I'm walking in San Francisco at times, a lot of people will tap me on the shoulder going, I knew it was you because of what I was wearing.
Yeah. So what do you think the result of the show has been? What are the outcomes? Do you think that as a result of the show and now the YouTube channel and all these years of exposure of painting in the national parks, do you think that you've brought a lot of people to painting?
I cannot tell you how many people have written me letters over the years. Originally, some people would contact me going, when I retire, I want to do what you're doing. I want to get a motorhome and I want to go to the national parks. And if you almost talk to anybody in America, because that's where the national parks are so beloved, they all have this vision that they're going to retire, get a motorhome, and travel the parks. And, then when they get there, they don't know what to do. And so what I gave them was permission to do art. And I didn't really focus so much on doing just painting. I was kind of a champion for people to do poetry, to write music, do something in our parks. They're really special, holy places. And it's a great place to be in touch with yourself. And I'd have a lot of people saying, that's what I want to do when I grow up. And then I got letters 10, 15 years after saying, what I told you I was going to do, that's what I'm doing now.
Cool.
And I've run into people in the convention. And that's the great thing about the convention is that you really get everybody who's doing that kind of energy together in one room. And I had people flag me.
We haven't actually talked about the convention because there are probably people listening to this that don't know what the heck are you talking about.
Yeah, well, we'll have to get that. That's the PleinAir convention that you host, and this year it's in San Diego, isn't it?
Yeah, April in San Diego. Well, so you think that a lot of people, obviously a lot of people went to the parks, wanted to enjoy the parks because you did this show in the various national parks. How many parks do you think you did out of all the national parks? How many did you shoot shows in?
We did 20 episodes, 20 different episodes.
20 episodes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And remember, the thing is, at the time we were shooting it, plein air painting was not even a concept. In fact, I think I remember talking with you at Folsom Street back 20 years ago, talking about, you were talking about putting together a magazine, and I said, I'm not sure if plein air painting is a good term, because we have to educate people to tell them what that is. Because when you talk to non-artists and you go, I'm a plein air painter, they have no idea what you're talking about.
You were smart using the words outdoor painter, and I picked up that from you. Our website is called outdoorpainter.com, and I think actually you're the one that let us use that name. But yeah, I remember you and I met in San Francisco, and gosh, I don't remember how long ago it was, but you were probably right. We were really a little too soon and a little too early, because when we first started PleinAir magazine, we We managed to keep it alive for about 2 or 3 years, but the thing we heard most is the galleries who we thought would advertise said, "Well, we don't deal in plein air paintings," and the art material companies all said, "Well, nobody paints in plein air, and why would we go to something so narrow?" And we couldn't get much advertising. We really struggled, and I had to close it down because I couldn't make any money with it. And then, of course, 6 years ago, I felt like the timing was a little better, and I had a little bit of meat on my bones, and I was able to try it again. And of course, this time it worked really well.
Well, Eric, the reason for that is because we were on the air for many years, and so now I had generated all these plein air painters. They needed a magazine, so it was just a.
Oh, that's probably right. Well, I think that you and I have kind of had this discussion offline, but I think that one of the things that you and I both believe is that we all have a responsibility to help other people discover this. You started it very early in your life, and it has served you well. You've built a career around it. You sell a lot of paintings. You, of course, had the TV show and the YouTube channel, and you built your brand on that. But I think that if we discover something that is really interesting in our lives that we think others would enjoy, I think we all have that responsibility. Maybe responsibility is too strong of a word, but we all have this. We should help others find it, because the thing that I love about plein air painting is I discovered it because, and I don't want to make this about me, but I discovered this because my wife said, "You got to get the smell of the paint out of the house," when she got pregnant. And so I started going outdoors, and I didn't know this thing called plein air painting existed. I didn't know about the people out there already doing it. But what a wonderful life it's been in terms of being able to travel to exotic places and take a canvas and paint the location, and to meet and paint with other people. It's very social. It's a chance to be creative. It's a chance to be outdoors. It's a chance to be able to, in some cases, some of us sell our work. Not everybody does, but and it's challenging, and so I call it the new golf. And I think that you have had a huge role in really helping establish that and bringing other people to it.
Well, I think that I have, ever since I started it, to go back to the TV series. When we first launched it, I had thought, because again, I'm young and I'm trying to make money. I mean, that's really when you're 22 and 23 and you say to your mom, "Hey, I want to be an artist." I mean, you don't quite get the smile and the pat on the back. It's like, are you crazy? Yeah, I mean, people starve doing that. And so, I originally, I love plein air painting, but I thought it would be a good business. And so I put it up on PBS, and, I put my 800 number up, and I was like sitting by the phone with my little Visa machine ready to fill orders, and nobody called. And I had to go check the TV guide to go see whether or not there was a Super Bowl or something on, and there wasn't. So I thought, well, maybe just they hadn't. And so for a couple of weeks, nobody called. And I was really, really upset, because I had a lot of money invested, a lot of, what I perceived, to have a business, you have to make money. And all of a sudden I got a phone call from somebody, and I said, "Good afternoon to Grandview." And I said, "How can I help you? What can I sell you?" or something. And the guy goes, "I don't want to buy anything." And I go, "Excuse me?" And he goes, "I want to speak to the artist." And I said, and back then I had no money, so I was answering the phones myself. And so I said, "Well, you're speaking to the artist." And he says, 5 years ago, I used to do what you do. I used to go to the national parks, and I used to paint outdoors. And I stumbled onto your show. And he said, after watching your show, he said, 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with diabetes. And they amputated both my feet. And I put my paints away, never thinking that I would ever paint again. And he said, after watching your show, I called my grandkids and said, "Get out the paints out of the garage. I'm going painting."
Wow.
And I think, you know, I adopted with the Grandview, our mission statement is to touch, move, and inspire millions of people. And art has a way of changing people's lives. I think as a human being, we owe it to us to share that experience, not for any other reason, but to enrich other people. Because I have never brought somebody to painting that didn't thank me for doing so.
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right about that, and I think for those people who might be listening, you know, we've got a lot of people listening to this podcast now, people who are discovering it who have never painted before, and I've heard from a lot of them. The one thing is you just have to stick with it. You know, I remember, and you probably remember the days when you get so frustrated that you just want to quit, you want to give it up, because you just can't seem to do it, but you just stick with it. You know, it's not about talent, it's about practice. And of course you can do bad practice too, so it's always best to get some instruction. It'll help you save a lot of time. But yeah, I think that's a fascinating story. And you know, there's so many stories that we have both shared and both heard over the years that of people who have had complete changes in their lives and in their outcome on their lives, and looking forward to being alive because they've taken this on. So I think it's very cool. Thank you for sharing that story. So I want to fast forward into a completely different area for a minute, because I know you do a lot of teaching. And first and foremost, there are a lot of people who are listening to this who are established and they know painting. There are also people out there who are just kind of taking it up or trying to figure it out. So first and foremost, for the early stage person, what is it that you recommend as a protocol, so to speak? You know, if you want to learn how to paint, what do you, other than buying your DVDs, which is probably an important thing to do, but what is it that you tell them to do?
Well, the first thing, you know, and we had made kind of light about this at the convention, but you have to get that you're not going to go out and become successful at this right away. There are a lot of people that will show you tricks and things. It is continuous practice. And painting has a weird thing, because if you were to take any instrument, you have to practice every day. I remember my mom telling me, practice the piano every day. And then she'd walk out of the room, I wouldn't practice, and then she'd walk back in again, and I pretended that I was practicing. But when you practice, you're not going to do your best work. You're not going to be good at it. You're just practicing. And when you are doing an instrument or anything like that, after the practice is over, there's nothing left, unless you're recording it, and very few people do that. But people have a weird sense that because they put it on canvas, it's permanent. And so they'll go out and have a bad day, and then they'll want to quit because of that. And they're just unreasonable with that. I mean, oil painting is one of the hardest things you can possibly do. It's got the most rewarding outcome, but to take a studio and go outdoors and deal with all of the stuff that happens out there, and if you're not accustomed to that environment, you're not going to be successful all the time. And I can tell you right now that if you go out thinking you will be successful, you probably won't, because it is a skill that needs to be mastered. Now, it's a noble thing, because when you think about painting, we build museums for painters. We build museums for painters. Painting is a noble act and it's worth learning. But it's not an easy skill, and you want to get good at it. The wonderful thing about it is that it's not a painful skill to develop. So if you're willing to go out and enjoy the process and pick up some clues, don't judge the experience by what you have done. Just judge the experience for what it is.
So do you recommend any particular thing to your students that goes beyond that? So, for instance, do you tell them, don't judge yourself, but go out and do a certain number of paintings? Do you tell them to start simple? What is it you tell them to do?
Normally what I tell them to do is, first thing, be reasonable. If you're going to go to Yosemite, don't paint, Bridal Veil Falls and all of its grandeur. Just find a tree and a rock and just be with that for a while and just get used to it. One thing that I have to tell, what I tell my students is that for some reason, a lot of artists like to paint whenever after breakfast and before wine time. That's usually the time that they want to go out and paint. And that's really the worst time to paint. If you want to be an artist, I always recommend getting up early. Start painting at 6 and stop at 8 or 9. Don't paint longer than 2 hours in a stretch, because after 2 hours, the scene is different. No matter how good you are, the scene is different. Put a lot of your footnotes on your painting early. So when you set up and you see the lighting effects, all of those lighting effects that you see when you set up early in the morning are going to go away within minutes. And Monet said that the scene will stay the same for about 7 minutes. Every 7 minutes, the scene changes. So when you sit down, you got to think about your concepts, kind of what you want to do, and then put footnotes everywhere. Put lights and darks just everywhere. Just don't worry about the painting. Don't start with the sky. Put in where lights and darks are and make a lot of notes. And then in that process, I always tell students that within about a half hour, it's almost best to turn your painting away from the scene and paint with the scene behind you. And the reason for that is because the most important thing, if you know Carlson's book of landscape painting.
Yeah, one of the classic books.
That's every artist, and that's the first thing I would say. Get that book. It's inexpensive. You can buy it at Amazon, but Carlson's book of landscape painting. The very last chapter, and when I was demonstrating at the PleinAir convention, I said to everybody in the room, I said, how many of you have read the Carlson's book on landscape painting? And everybody raised their hand. And I said, tell me, what is the last chapter in that book? And not one person could recall it.
Because they didn't read it.
They may not, but they probably thought, it's not that important. It's probably the most important thing in that entire book, and that's memorization. You have to build your memory skills to how things are when you first set up. The reason why a lot of plein air paintings fail is because the artist is painting the scene as you go along. And I guarantee you that wonderful, inspired scene that you see at 8 in the morning becomes nothing at 11. And most artists will paint into nothing. So they're painting along, the lights change, they paint that effect, and then the lights change, and they wonder why the whole painting got muddy or got away from them, and it's because first they didn't have a clear concept, and within the first 10 minutes, actually say, this is where my lights are, this is where my shadows are. Now, I learned this from doing the TV show, and if anybody actually watches my television show, we would go into the painting sequence really early. We would be on location at 6 in the morning. And I would tell the cameraman, I want you to shoot that rock. I want you to shoot that flower. How the lighting was at 6 o'clock. Most of the shots that we did for the TV show were 4 hours long, from beginning to end. So all the paintings that you see that are done for the TV show are 4 hour plein air. And that is, we had to cut out all of the motorcycles, the tourists, the planes, really bad acting on my part, mistakes that I did on the painting we had to redo. So that all took 4 hours. By the time I get to the end of the painting, the scene was no good. I actually had to work at trying to remember how the scene looked when we first set up. And because I knew what the cameraman would do is that I would say, now we're going to paint the flowers in the front. And I remember at 5 o'clock, there was a beautiful sunlight effect on the flowers. And I had to recall that because I knew he was going to splice in the picture of the flowers as they were at 5 o'clock. And so I would recall how that was. And I would recall how the lighting was on the trees. And I would recall it. And so if you paint with the idea that you hang on to your ideas at the beginning, and even though the scene is changing, that is a muse, that's one of those sirens that calls you into the rocks and eventually you drown. You can't go with all of that. You know, if all of a sudden an hour and a half into it, some other stunning lighting effect happens, you need to say, thank you for sharing, take a picture of it, and maybe do it tomorrow. Okay? When you're starting a painting, you've got to stick with your main idea. Otherwise, your entire painting will get away from you.
So let me ask you this. You have a tremendous amount of drama in your paintings, especially something like a Yosemite painting and so on. You know, you get the streaks of light and you get a lot of haze and a lot of effects. Are those things that you're setting up and planning when you first go set up and you see the scene? Are you planning those things? Are you dropping them in later? How do you create the difference between a rendering and a painting?
Okay. Well, you know, I feel that the difference between, what we do is we make things beautiful. And so take ordinary places and make them extraordinary. And that's why I always tell artists that they need to go early in the morning or in the evenings to do their paintings. During the day, there's nothing, it's ordinary and there's nothing you can do about it. But a lot of times when you get up in the morning, you have this beautiful sunrise with light streaks. That happens, but those effects happen in a very short period of time. And you need to hold on to those. I mean, we were doing a film of Olympic National Park, and I started painting, and I do the opening, and here we are at Olympic National Park. And as you can see, it's really foggy today. And so I'm going to teach you how to do fog on the beach. And I got probably 10 minutes into it, and we had all of the insert shots and everything shot. And all of a sudden, the fog burned out, and I was sitting in blue sky, And so I had to still keep in mind my final outcome that I wanted to do at the very beginning. And so oftentimes in those cases, you have to either choose, okay, I'm going to abandon this painting and turn it into blue sky, or I'm going to try to keep the integrity. Things, you could drive through your neighborhood and it's ordinary all the time. I'm sure that you drive to work sometimes and you go, wow, Texas is kind of ugly sometimes. And then there are some times when you drive home from work at a sunset and you go, wow, it's really beautiful here. Look at this lighting. Nothing's changed except the light. And so paintings rely on the light. People love Monet's painting. It's not because they like, lilies and trees. It's because they love lighting. And so lighting is so important. When there's a storm and all of a sudden you have a light ray, everybody will stop and look at that. So why not bring those extraordinary moments into your painting? There's a lot of paintings out there that are nicely painted, but they're not very memorable.
Right.
And so you should always look for, and that's why the concept is so important ahead of time. It's like, okay, this is a landscape, very nice, And I think also because I get bored with just painting what's in front of me. I like stretching it out. I love pushing my colors.
Mm-hmm.
I love the creative part of it. I'm somewhat of a romantic in a way. I don't know if you get that when you see me and talk to me, but
you don't do anything for me.
I remember I taught you how to dance at the last convention. Remember that?
I did. Say that again.
That I taught you how to waltz.
You taught me how to waltz?
Yeah, you remember the beginning of the convention when you needed to dance with that saloon girl.
Oh, that's right. I forgot all about that. Well, rumors will get started. So let me ask you this, because we're kind of getting to the point of winding down here pretty soon. The one thing I heard from a lot of people attended your sessions, and the one thing I heard a lot was, I've been painting my whole life, and I never heard what Stefan said, and it really made things all come together. Do you know what I'm talking about, and can you articulate what it was?
I can't recall exactly what all that was, because over the years I've set up my YouTube station, and channel, and that was primarily a vehicle for students who didn't see my lectures to be able to get caught up. And I had no idea that nationally it would take off the way that it did. And so in that process of working, there were a lot of things like, I talk about checkering, which is something that it's a term I made up because I'm not quite sure what it was. It was an old Illustrator term.
What does it mean?
Well, it's where, people say like light upon dark, dark upon light, but they don't get the extreme effect of that. It's where if you have a circle, if you just paint the circle one color on top of a background, that circle will look like it's just cut out. But if you take that circle and you do a light section, and then immediately behind that on the background, you put a dark section. And then on the circle, you go and put a dark section, and then put a light section behind it, and then a dark section and a light section. So like if you're doing the side of a face or an animal or a rock or anything like that, you literally come out of value, light to dark, dark to light, and then the background is doing the opposite. And the more you can do that over a short area, it's an old Illustrator trick. It stitches the painting together so that things don't look like a cutout. That would be one of them. We talk about echoing. A lot of those stuff's on my YouTube station. Temperatures are really crucial in paintings. Transitions are really crucial. There should be no inch in a painting that isn't going through either a temperature transition or a value transition. There's a lot of things. I mean, I've been teaching for 40 years. And if you listen to my YouTube station, you would see that I cover a lot of insights on mediums and things. So I don't think it was necessarily just one thing. I think it's just a whole avalanche of things.
Well, since I think then that that's something that we'll encourage everybody to do. I would assume they just look up your name, Stefan Baumann, The Grand View, and it'll show up on YouTube. Yes?
Yes, I
okay,
will do
cool.
that. And also at the convention this year, if you want to hear a lot of these things in depth, then get to the convention and then watch my demonstration.
Oh, cool. All right, terrific. Well, Stefan, this has been really fun, and we probably could go on for hours and hours and hours. You've got so much experience and so much to offer to the world when it comes to plein air painting, and so I'm thankful for you, and I want to acknowledge you because you've done a lot for the plein air painting scene, if you will. I don't want to say industry because I don't like that word in this case, but you've brought a lot of people to painting. You've inspired a lot of people, and that's been good for the movement. And I'm sure there's lots of people out there that are now subscribers to Plein Air Magazine or come to the Plein Air Convention or participate with us in some way who found all of that through you. So I think we're all very appreciative and thankful that you have pursued the dream that you pursued when you were 20 years old, 22 years old. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Eric. And I feel the same way with you because you have definitely made plein air painting mainstream. And I think that you are truly a gift to the art world in so many ways. Very few people have contributed like you have in so many different fashions to the art world. So I'm speaking for the art world. Thank you, Eric Rhoads, for what you have done over the many years of your attention to painting.
Well, you're very welcome. Thanks. Sounds like we have a mutual admiration society going on here.
Yeah. Well, we can carry that on at the convention over a beer or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Stefan, thank you for your time today. And there's probably a part 2 of this coming sometime in the future because we have so much to talk about. You're a fascinating guy, and you've done so much. Thank you. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Well, thanks again to Stefan Baumann. This is sponsored by the PleinAir Convention this April in San Diego, with some of the most amazing artists in the world as faculty. We just keep adding more and more. Whether you're a beginner just learning to paint or an experienced pro, this is the most amazing painting event on the face of the earth, guaranteed. We go outdoors to paint every day. We have big screens in 4 stages indoors, and everybody absolutely loves this event. It's a lot of fun. And if you can possibly go, this is the time to go because we're in beautiful San Diego. So we also have a giant expo hall of lots of goodies and art supplies. You can learn more at plenairconvention.com. The interview is also sponsored by the Plenair Salon art competition. There's $15,000 grand prizes in the cover of Plenair magazine, and of course lots and lots of other prizes annually and bi-monthly prizes as well. And you'll be seen by top judges, and your career will soar if you win. And lots of people win. Even if you win in a category, it's really great to have something to talk about. But get your entry in. End of the year, it's the last chance. Enter at plenairsalon.com. All right. Well, the plein air movement is red hot, which is why Plenair magazine continues to be the top representational art magazine sold at Barnes & Noble nationwide. Drop by, pick one up. We're very proud of that. Thank you for making that happen. You can get a subscription at pleinairmagazine.com. It's always fun to do these interviews. I learned so much from people. Let's do this again sometime, like next week, and we'll see you then. I am Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. Remember, it's a big, beautiful world out there which deserves to be painted. We'll see you. Bye-bye.